in the first place. So because we don't know who they are, we don't know how they get the material, and we don't ask them to know. So in terms of US jurisprudence, there's not an issue for us. In terms of Swedish jurisprudence, that would also be the case because that has a higher standard.
David, please.
David Williamson, editor at Global Reporting. I can see some parallel what you're doing to the reporting by Simon Harrison, the 70s from the Vietnam War, actually on the My Lai massacre. His reporting was not done in the field. He did interviews with people. I mean, the technology was different. And all of that, and you showed us an embedded reporter who was most concerned with taking a shower than what the reality in the country. My question to you is, do you see from your reporting and the effect it has had and how it's been so well spread in the world, that other media might reconsider how they report on the war, that they will put more focus on investigative reporting and less on sending reporters out as embedded reporters? Second question, the news you spread, I mean, spread all over the world and media is picking up. Do you see any increase in your income? You need income to continue with the investigative reporting. Do people also take part in financing your work?
So I'll answer the last question first because it's a very important one. Since the funding for our organisation has come from the people involved directly up until January this year. It came from me and others who were directly involved, totally committed into spending both their time and money. But as we grew and as the demands grew, for example, the bandwidth for the collateral murder video was worth $600,000. Fortunately, we were able to gain subsidies for that from Google. But it can be expensive to run such a large, such a popular operation. But since January, we have called upon the general public to assist us, and we have raised some $1 million, which is not a lot when considering the demands that we have, but it is completely independent. It is not from a foundation. It is from people like the people in this room. It is from mums and dads from all over the world. And that is giving us an unparalleled degree of independence in what we can publish. We have tried to get foundation funding during that period. And in fact, we were rated first out of 3,000 applications to the Knight Foundation, which hands out about $100 and something million per year in the United States. Then we released the video showing the slaying of 2 Reuters journalists and 80 other people in Baghdad, and that application was cancelled for what two judges involved held up is for political reasons. So it really is important to have a diverse funding base that is built around the interests of people and not organizations that are busy in power plays. I'm sorry, and your first question was?
If you see that your example, you're setting an example that more media, if you're setting an example that more media will put more resources into investigative reporting from war zones.
So you mentioned the example of Cy Hirsch and the My Lai massacre. So I spoke to Cy Hirsch about this last year, and while many people have heard of the My Lai massacre as the sort of archetypical example of abuse exposed in Vietnam, what people probably don't know is that Cy Hirsch couldn't get that story out, that he wrote, submitted it to New York Times, Washington Post, etc., and it was not accepted. And that he had to work with his brother, who was a recent law graduate, to set up effectively a fake newswire service, and then as part of their initial product, hand that out to regional newspapers. that's how the My Lai massacre was broken, by, if you like, working out a clever hack for the media system. Now, we have a different way in different sorts of technology to get out stories that would otherwise not be revealed to the public. For this particular case, there was an assassination squad I discovered, Task Force 373, that is working its way down, kill captures of at least 2,000 people, called the JPEL, Joint Priority Effects List, and the PEL, and the JEL, Joint Effects List. And that story became the cover of the Spiegel and was mentioned extensively in The Guardian, but did not appear in the New York Times. However, that story was written by Eric Schmidt, a New York Times reporter, but it was not used. Now, Bill Keller, the editor of the New York Times, tells me that, well, they had done something about this a little bit before and they wanted to do something later and space constraints, etc. So maybe there was a good reason to not publish that story, but the Spiegel thought it was important enough to make it the cover of their magazine, and yet it was not mentioned at all in the New York Times. Task Force 444 and Task Force 42, British equivalents, Special Forces assassination squads operating in Afghanistan. They were revealed by the Sunday Times based upon our data. The journalist Stephen Gray, whose most famous book is Ghost Plane, which is about renditions, he took that data and worked on it. What people here do not know, and what the general public does not know, is that Stephen Gray had discovered Task Force 444 and Task Force 42 over a year ago, and had attempted to put them in his book about Afghanistan. However, they were under a D notice, a censorship order by the British government, and his publisher forced him to remove them. The Sunday Times was aware of that censorship order as well, but could successfully argue that because we had already made the information public, they could report it. So we are creating a space for others to follow. We are giving license, for example, for the Sunday Times to report where it could not report before.
Yes, please. Over there, if you can.
Thank you for an interesting talk. My name is Håkan Andersson, lawyer and social democrat. I'm just wondering, how do you ascertain the problem that these are actual documents, or actual the truthfulness of the documents that you receive?
Yeah. So, some people schooled in traditional journalism, they ask, well, how do you verify your sources if you don't know who they are? And we say, well, we never verify sources. We don't do that. We verify documents. And I think that is, in fact, a much higher standard because, say, for example, Judith Miller at the New York Times, who famously reported false information about collaboration between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda shortly before the Iraq War in 2003. She verified her sources within the US administration. However, her sources were passing her fake documents. So don't verify sources, verify what people say or what the actual documents are. And to date, we have never been wrong as far as we know, and no one else in fact alleges that we have been wrong in any instance. We have an easier task than most journalists in that we only deal with official documents. So we have become specialists in how to verify official documents, and official documents are actually very hard to fabricate in a good way. We're talking about hundreds of pages, for an example. The economic cost and the opportunity cost for someone to do that fabrication is high, and the chance of it being discovered by us is high. And then because we release all our primary source material, the opponents of that document and the general public will rip it to shreds. And there's no doubt that if Judith Mueller had revealed her primary source material for those articles that she wrote about in the New York Times, which facilitated the invasion of Iraq, the Iraqi government would have been very highly motivated to tear them to shreds. So would any of its allies, and so would people, academics and others who opposed the war. So releasing primary source material is a way of creating some discipline on journalists and on people who provide journalists with documents. Now, I could go on at length, we do forensics and all sorts of things on these documents, but in the end it's not so hard actually. You just call up the organization and say, is it yours? And the answer is yes, no, or maybe. We've only had no on 2 occasions, which is very interesting. We've had yes, but it's not what you think. On very many occasions was an attempt to spin the issue. And we've had, we won't tell you quite a bit from intelligence organizations. We won't tell you either way. It's a matter of policy, we never say that. But that's absolute nonsense. I mean, they will tell you if it's framed in the right way. And one of the ways to deal with that, if you're dealing with intelligence organizations, is you don't talk about the document, you talk about facts in the document. Is it true that on this particular date, such and such happened? And then if the organization refuses to speak about that event, then they are rightly seen as attempting to conceal information from the public or being duplicitous. So they are in fact reluctant to do that. And once you establish enough facts that are true through the document, within a document, then you put the question about the whole document. And if you've established the facts in the document that it's true, well, you go with your sort of journalistic gut instinct and say, well, of course the whole thing is true. There would be no point in where all the facts are true, but the document itself is not true.
Thank you very much, Julian. May I put a final question before we make a break and allow for a short press conference as well? As you have mentioned, the Swedish rules and regulation and laws regarding media are very strong, and as Swedes we are also very proud of our that everyone has a right of access to all information, for example, and also the strong protection of sources, which gives enormous power, of course, to media. And following that, there's also strong self-regulation of media in Sweden. So it's a bit particular climate, and you mentioned that this is a friendly environment to do this kind of work. Could we foresee a closer relation in the future between Wikileaks and Sweden?
Well, I'm not sure how much closer it could be.
Will you come more frequently?
Well, I mean, we have people here. We're setting up a journalistic office here. I am now a columnist for Aftonbladet. I mean, how much closer could it be? But there is an issue actually as we have more money and resources. Where do we want our primary office to be? And of course, in the summer I would say Sweden for sure, but I've also been here in the winter. I think we all need at least 2.
Iceland.
I think that's quite accurate. Thank you very much, Julian, for giving this interesting seminar and allowing for the questions. We will now make a short break and allow the possibility for the journalists here also to ask more questions if there is need for that. But thank you very much.
Also, during the break, there were some journalists that wanted private interviews. Just come
Ja, jag tror det var.